Good to go.
All right. Welcome, everyone. Thanks for joining our Tech Talk with the Tech Academy this Friday. Today, we have a special guest. We have Tyler Hoff here with us from OpenTeams, he's a recruiter there, actually. They're going to give us some tips, and then we're going to get into all your questions. So make sure you have all those ready. Put them in the chat box. We'll get to all of them. But thank you so much for being here, Tyler, and take it away.
Thank you. Quick little introduction on me, OpenTeams, and what we do. We work with a variety of companies. Some of the FANG companies, Meta is probably our biggest one, to companies all the way down to small startups. We do recruiting for both internal and external needs. So we do consulting work. So you could come and work for one of our partner companies. OpenTeams has a few other companies. We call them Premier Partners and Platinum Partners, where Quansight Labs, Jupyter Hub, Anaconda, different companies that are underneath us that we support, and then they'll do consulting work with various companies. So you could come and work for company A, but you'll never actually do something for them. You're always consulting out, or direct hire and placement with another company. So like last week, we placed quite a few people over at Meta, and they're going to be a direct employee of them. I just do the headhunting, screening, interviews, and then we send them over for hire. So they actually do all their technical interviews and everything with us. So a little bit of glimpse into what I do now. Previously, I worked for Steve Wozniak's company, more on the junior side. So most of the roles that I have right now are being mid-level and upper level. We do have residencies, which are paid positions, but they're typically under like a contract basis, so like 3 to 4 months. And it's a way for us or the other partner companies that we have to test out a developer before we decide to offer them a full-time position with the organization. So, and we are expanding this year quite a bit. I came on in December of 2021, so just a few months back, and hopefully we can expand to bring on a variety of talent, not just the mid and upper level. I'd say probably 5% of the roles we bring on are going to be junior level. But if we can expand that, that's kind of my goal this year, especially with where the market's at, right? I mean, we have a lot of junior developers coming out that would be great to bring on. So wanted to kind of prep a little bit some of the things that I think would be helpful. And if we don't have questions in some areas, we can breeze past those. In other areas where there's more questions or people want to dive into more, go into that a little bit. So first and foremost, I wanted to start with resumes, if that's okay. So kind of some quick bullet points of do's and don'ts. And that I had a gentleman yesterday, I worked with him on LinkedIn. He just reached out to me, had me look at his resume, and right from the get-go, without putting it through our ATS, is like, okay, I saw some issues there, and made some notes of things that are important. One, your resume, make it a PDF, and two, save that PDF as your name, like with your resume. Because I'll get so many resumes that are downloaded, or I put them in, and it'll be 1, 4, 5, 7, 8, and it just kind of like this weird format, right? Save your resume as your name, because if I'm downloading something, say I'm going in on LinkedIn and we post a job on there, or anywhere else where we have it, if I pull it, I want to be able to quickly find it, and it makes it easier for somebody else, right? So if you have a clean PDF with your name saved as the resume, it looks a lot better. Two would be making sure that your resume is good for ATS, right? So your name should pop up, your phone number should pop up, your email, everything like that. The one that I got, when he sent it over, he had his email as a hyperlink. I don't know if anybody's done that before, or wherever I'm talking about, but it just said email, and it was in the blue lettering, so I could click on it to see it, but it didn't have his email in there. So when it goes into our system one, his name was in a what do you call it? Word art. So it wasn't part of the text. So his name showed up as his first project that he worked on, and then his email didn't show up, and it had his phone number. So had he applied to like a mass job, anything like that, any big company where it'd run it through an ATS, even if they wanted to set up an interview with them, they use their system to kick out that email. he won't get an email because it didn't show up in there. So it's things like that that you want to be cognizant of when you're building your resume. I was going to show you a picture of two that I like. Share. And things that I think will help you stand out a little more. So with this resume, one thing I like is on the right-hand side, like all the skills that are listed right there, with maintaining that organization, right? And you're going to have more and more as that comes in. My critique for this one, though, would be having the education below the skill set. I don't care where he went to school. I want to see the skills right up front. So like, you can't see it. It just has name, phone number, email address, all this stuff is GitHub portfolio, all that stuff in the heading, and it jumps right into a summary. Now, this is one thing I really like. Rather than a paragraph for your summary, break it into digestible bullet points real quick with different, sections, right? So front-end developer with 4+ years of experience in development, enhancement, and technical support, right? You probably don't have 4 months experience or 4 years experience, but you can put software developer with experience in. If you have anything less than 12 months or really, less than 2 years, just put experience in. Don't put 12 months or whatever else, just leave it at that. And break it down, right? So I like the format of this one, mainly just because of it's clear and quick to read. Now his experience probably is something that wouldn't be as beneficial in your situation right now. This is the second one that I like. And the biggest part why I like this one is it highlight when I do this? See how they have proficient and then they have what they have here and then knowledgeable, they break it up. In LinkedIn, and we can get to that, you want to have as many keywords as you can that pop up, right? So if I'm looking for somebody and I go in there and I'm like, okay, PrestoDB, JavaScript, Node.js, Postgres, all this different stuff. When I'm typing in those keywords, you want to be popping up at the top there, even if you don't have a solid foundation, like where you're, an expert in it. You want to have as many keywords or buzzwords as you can. So that's why, I like this. I've seen it where people have it too on a scale, proficient and then knowledge, like, expert. They kind of rank it out and they'll do it on the right-hand side. And then this is the part to me that's really important, how they did their projects, right? Because his professional experience, he has some, but I'm assuming that most of the people in here probably don't have a year of software development experience. So you're relying heavily on your projects and what you're doing. This is the format that I think is excellent for that. Because I've seen somewhere they just have like a project, and they have like a paragraph about the project or like a screenshot of it. Like, no, that's probably like a cover letter looking thing. So, right, he has the projects that he did, whether you're a developer or a contributor, right? Maybe you did something as a team or you worked with other people. If you're a contributor, putting that on there, and then whether or not it's finished or in progress, right? Because if I go and look at it and it's terrible, but it doesn't say in progress, my mind's like, wow, that's your finished product. Like that's where you're at. And then what they did in that, like why, not just this helps, people find stuff, recipe cookbook, what that usual one, where actually breaks down what technologies they used in it, what it was designed for, all of that, right? Like this really, to me, brings out somebody who did like this individual, they did a boot camp, and it just really highlights though their abilities and how to showcase that, right? Because that's really what you're taking in, is not just, hey, I can follow instructions. I can understand, I can speak it, right? That's really what most companies are going to look for. So, and then get rid of all that extra clutter, right? You can put if I go back over here, if you have your summary that spells out really well, like all the main things that you did in your boot camp, right? You have different sections, different things. So just bullet each of those, capstone events that you did. And then under experience, rather than experience, I'd probably put my projects next. And then below projects, you still want to have some work, even if your work experience has nothing to do with software development. If you don't have any work experience, my question would be like, do you even know what a real job is like? Can you work with a team? But if you were, say, a hostess or a lifeguard and everything else, you don't need to have a whole paragraph about how you're a lifeguard and you saved X amount of lives, CPR and everything else. You can literally just put, lifeguard X amount of years, right? It just shows that you can hold down a job. That's really all they're going to look for. So, but I call it declutter, because you want to, kind of pull that back. The biggest things that you're going to want right at the top are really, clear, are going to be your technical skills. And then right after that, your projects and or experience, if you have it.
Looks like, Joseph, do you have a question on any of that? Was that an accident? Feel free to ask, unmute your mic, or chat in the chat box. Maybe it was an accident, right?
No worries. And then my other recommendation is have your resume peer reviewed, right? Send it out to a couple people and have them look at it. And if they send it back to you, hey, everything looks great, I always get leery of that. So my recommendation is to make 2 errors that are kind of hidden within your resume, like write just a poorly grammatically structured sentence. So if they kick it back to you and say, hey, everything looks great, then you know that they didn't do a good job of looking over your resume, right? Like that's a pretty easy tell right there. So if you have your 2 mistakes and you kick it out to somebody and they identified those 2 mistakes, then odds are that person really did look through your resume and they're critiquing what it should say and everything else. So that's my recommendation for that. And again, I'm not saying these are perfect resumes. These are ones that I could just kind of copy and paste really quick. So I didn't go through all the verbiage. Just from kind of glancing at from far back, this is going to be easy to read. So, and then if he wants to copy, I can send that over to your team and they can.
Yeah, I can definitely share this information with everyone if you'd like to. Thanks to Tyler sending it over. And then Jeff asked, in light of as many keywords, what's too much, like naming every programming language you kind of know? Or
no, you want to name, if you know it, put it in there. Even if it has, hey, I just did one project in this and I can pick it up, put that in there. And this is where I think if you have a lot, this is where organizing it like this is going to be a lot better. Right. So when I go in and I'm looking for somebody who, it's going to be a visualization one, and then perfect, I can go right into frameworks and libraries and then just look right here, right? Everything's kind of summed up. If you just kind of cluster them all in there, just trying to think of everything and don't have a cadence to it, then it gets too cluttered. But if you have it broken up like this, I think this will really help. And you'll see, if you have, hopefully you have senior developers or mid-level developers in your network on LinkedIn, where they have a resume that you can take a look at and kind of see their structure. Because the further along you get, the more this should fill up. And then eventually this will be gone. And then you're just going to only have your experience with the technologies you use primarily in your experience. So to me, this is when I see a resume where it has like the skills, everything else, that's more for before you get to a director level position. Once you get to a senior software developer, most of that stuff will probably be washed out and just put into your experience as you go.
And then Jeff has one quick question again. So the back languages with the projects, is that what you mean, right?
Sorry, what was the question?
It says, so back languages with projects, ? What exactly do you mean with?
Do you mean like putting out there like this? Where they talk about the technology and the.
Yeah, he might be typing. Let's see. Support your knowledge of languages with projects.
Yeah, I think that's where the difference between proficient versus knowledgeable would come in. And I'll kind of restructure here. So I was going to talk about like open source, right? If you're contributing to like open source projects, things like that, there may be areas where, you didn't do a whole project yourself, or, you didn't actually have a job in it. You weren't getting paid to dabble in that, but you're contributing to like an open source project, kind of getting familiar with areas like that. in that coding language, then that's where you can still put it up in your knowledgeable base or proficient or expert, kind of how you want to rank that.
Michael says, I've heard some different advice from other sources. They've said that you shouldn't put anything on your resume unless you are prepared to talk about it for at least 5 minutes in an interview. What's the threshold?
If you're going to be tested on it, you better be comfortable with at least talking to it, right? You don't want to put on there, I plan on learning this. That's not applicable. But there are things where you should be able to pick it up pretty quick, like a good parallel. If you're doing one, you can likely do the other, right? Like, if I don't see HTML and CSS on a resume, but they're a senior developer, I know they can do that, right? Like, there are some things that are just assumed, and then some things that you can pick up pretty quick. Now, again, you're not putting on there what I think I can learn this. That's not what I'm advocating for. It's getting familiar or knowing how it works, so you feel like you could probably pick it up within a month. If you were hitting the ground running and that was part of your job, I look at it as like the 70% rule, right? If you have 70% of the skills that we need, then hey, we can bring you on board and probably make up for that other 30. But outside of that, that's going to be a bit of a struggle right there.
Awesome. I think that's all the questions we have. Sherry asked, what do you mean skills will be washed out? Did you mean absorbed? Yeah, so basically you were saying how it will be part of your experience instead of you actually having to put it on your resume as a skill anymore.
Yeah, because you're talking 5 years into your career. If you've been pivoting around quite a bit, every 24 months, moving up project, every 12 months, kind of moving up, your technical skill, that would just be half a page, with everything, if you kind of really dove down to the weeds. And so that's why people will usually put their highest proficiencies or things like that. But again, right now, for like the next 3 years, you should be able to list everything out. I don't foresee anybody just, being a library of knowledge in every coding area, right? It's kind of that crawl, walk, run, right? And I talked about this before the meeting started, was, you're not jumping into a senior architect position right now. So, getting your feet front end or back end developer to then the full stack and moving up that realm, again, you dictate your future though. So where you want to go and what you want to learn, work on side projects, because I don't know any successful developer who's only doing their job 40 hours a week and then progressing in the career that they want to. Either you're going to progress in the way that your company is pushing you to go, or you're going to progress in the way that you want to go, right? Like, say your first job offer is with Purina Puppy Chow, and they're having you focus in on one skill set, like, hey, we really like it because this is what you can do, and we're having you run full force with that. Well, great, but you're then going to pigeonhole yourself to only be that type of function for the next role unless you're doing stuff outside of that, right? Like, continue with projects, things that you enjoy, to get into maybe a different position that you want to do. If you want to go kind of more on the data analytics side and something with Meta and something over there, your position with Purina Puppy Chow is not going to get you to that position. It's going to be the work that you do on top of that that'll leverage you to that, because they're going to say, hey, you know how to do this, so you can probably pick up this if you're just proficient at it or you've kind of dabbled in it. Those skills are quickly transferable.
Awesome. It looks like Sherry actually did a project using that puppy chow. But yeah, I think that's all the questions we have for now. Let us know if you have more, guys.
And then next, we'll be kind of making sure that this is on LinkedIn, right? Have your resume on LinkedIn and keep your profile up with that, right? All those keywords, all those buzzwords, having that in there. And this is where it won't hurt you to have extra stuff in there, right? Because your resume is one thing, but if you have other stuff where you're talking about, working with projects that did X, Y, and Z, even if you didn't do that, and this is, again, it's not great for recruiters because it's going to put you into their candidate pool probably a lot more than they want. But this is more about you, not about what I want, right? So you want to be seen. So having extra stuff in there where you're saying, would like to learn blank next, right? I would love to learn Python, this year, goal of learning this year, right? If I go in and I type in a bunch of stuff that I'm looking for as a recruiter and I put in Python as that, you're going to pop up in my thing. And that's going to help you, because you like I said, you may hit that 70% to where, okay, hey, great. Actually, they have everything, but Python's part of it, but it's not a big part. You don't have it yet, but you want to learn it. Okay, great. Let me put you in there. Right? Does that make sense though? Why you want to have those buzzwords where you're popping up? Because again, then it's the recruiter's job to filter you out, but at least you're being filtered into their net, right? When they're casting their net in and they're pulling everybody up and they're looking through all the candidates that came back in that search, you want to be in that search. You'd rather be disqualified than never considered. So that's where having those things will benefit you a lot more in the beginning, I feel like, personally. Now, again, I don't like that as a recruiter, because then I'm having to filter through. I'm like, dang it, they're not a good fit, or they were at 70, but really half those words they're talking about are things that they haven't done yet, so they don't work. But again, that's on me though. It still puts you into my view, and that's your benefit, right? So yeah, don't be upset about upsetting recruiters or wasting their time, because again, this is your career. So take advantage of that. And then with that, one thing I think that really helps the resume look good, when we talk about the experience, a lot of people have the gap where they have their resume looked at, but then the experience or something else will knock them out. If you're working a part-time job right now, or you're working a job and it's, hey, I work in hospitality or food services or something else outside of tech, then you may want to consider getting a part-time job as, IT support, technical support, something that puts you in the realm of technology. So while you're searching for your career that you want, you're at least in the field right now, building up that, right? Now, again, your perspective shouldn't be, man, why did I do everything I just did? I spent a bunch of money. I went to this boot camp. I'm training. I'm doing everything I could, did the schooling, and now I'm doing a job that, doesn't require all the skills that I have now. That's fine, like, right? Because you're still putting yourself in the field. You shouldn't be planning on having that same IT support job for 6 months or 12 months. That should be just here's a 90-day stepping stone to help you kind of speak the language, get familiar with the culture and everything else, to then move out of that. And I spoke to some of the companies that did that before, right? So like HCL, Infosys, TCS, Cognizant, right, where they have hundreds of people that they need for their IT and technical support, things like that they will move up within the company. So to me, it's a good way to kind of get your foot in the door, because there's apprenticeships you can get your foot in the door. There's some paid internships, but most of them aren't going to be paid. Your residencies that'll get you paid, different ways like that get you in the door. That may not be that $75,000 to $110,000 software developer salary, but again, it's that keeping that interjection with your goal, right? If you're on the path, that's what you want to be on. It's hard to, you want to be a senior software developer, but if you're not ever stepping on the path of IT, that walkway, then it's hard to make that jump. But if you're getting that jump a little bit earlier, and yeah, you're walking on the path and it's IT support or whatever else, at least you're in that sphere, and it's quicker and easier to move up within that. And I think my brother-in-law, who was self-taught, and he started off, he did IT support for 2 years while he just self-studied, and then he got into the role that he's at now and progressed and everything. But we were talking, he's like, man, if I could have done a boot camp, I would have been at that IT support job probably for about 4 months, and then taken that big jump, because he had the connections, he had the ability there. So that's my thought, is keeping that long-term perspective and how to get there, right? You're kind of building that foundation block by block. So put as many blocks as you can, and that's going to help your resume too. So keep your resume up to date. If you get that IT support job, don't forget to put that in your resume and continue that. So any questions or anything about that? Or
we do have a few questions. Robert's asking, I was told by a recruiter that if I'm a junior level not to expect responses from recruiters unless I was a senior level, because the companies that hire recruiters are looking for experience, not entry level?
It all depends on the company. So I'm here in Austin. I mean, I look at the startups where they don't have the money a lot of times to hire all the senior developers that they need. So they're good with bringing in, 2 senior developers, and then rather than hiring 2 more senior developers, they're like, okay, we can bring in 4 junior developers for it. So it's about being creative and knowing where to look, in my mind. So, that to say that there is no junior developer role, I mean, everybody's getting there some way, and in terms of budgeting, because that's what I look at, right? Like when we have somebody that we can bring on, so, we have a budget of 400,000 for a project, we can let a company know, hey, you could probably get 4 mid-tier developers, or if you want a director, a senior developer, and 3 juniors, that may be the way to go. In terms of breaking down the projects, things like that. So that's where it really depends on the company. Yeah, I can't imagine, most of your FANG companies, they still have junior level, but they're probably hiring them from within. They're probably taking people from an apprenticeship or residency, internships, or people who are in their IT support, and they're promoting within the company. That's why most of your big companies aren't advertising for a junior developer role, because they have enough people internally to pull that through. So getting that IT support position with a company helps pull you through, because you've already proved, hey, they're willing to bring you on. You're going to showcase your skill set, and then the hiring manager for the person you're reporting to. So it makes it way easier to get that junior developer job as it's opening up. And this is where you're in the right market for. There's so much of a need for developers, but so much fear in taking on somebody who's too junior, quote, too junior. But really, too junior just means that you haven't been able to showcase your skill set yet. Doesn't mean that you don't have it. So if you can at least get in with the company and then show them what you know, then you already have their attention.
Great. All right. Next question. Julian says, would you recommend a cold method, as in sending out 20 resumes a day, or spending more time focusing on networking and projects?
I would spend a bulk of my time networking. Projects, I would spend time in it, but I look at it like 15 to 30 minutes a day to keep your skill set up. But I wouldn't be putting in 5 hours a day into your project when you want to get a career, you want to get things started. I do find that there's value in pushing out. If it's on Tuesdays and Thursdays for 3 hours, I just do a resume blitz. But you don't want your whole method to just be blitzing, right? Like look at it on the sales side, you have blitzing and everything, but you can get some stuff out of that, but you're going to get a lot of return that isn't valuable. So I would recommend doing the blitz, but then don't expect it to be your main way of getting into a position. So I think networking, getting in with the right people, asking for advice, getting in with senior developers, finding mentors, and then working with them and talking with them about, are there opportunities, things like that get you in with a company. I would be surprised if you reached out to 5 mid-level developers with a company or an organization that you're interested in going with, and you reach out to them and said, hey, do you have any advice or things like that? You're probably going to get advice from, I'd say, about half the developers at least back. I would hope that you would. Most people, I even get people who respond back. I rarely get ghosted. They at least let me know, no, I'm not interested. So I imagine a junior developer reaching out, asking for advice or help, or their thoughts. They're probably going to get feedback. And then when positions open up or anything else, you kind of have your foot in the door. Somebody that's going to be your easiest way to get in with a company is a referral, especially if it's on their team. They're probably more likely to take you under their wing if they know that you're that type of person who's going to take their advice and guidance.
Great. All right. And then last question for now, it says, Brent is asking, what are good methods to actually get your resume in front of someone's face when you don't have a lot of contacts in the industry?
Are you referring to get it in like front of a recruiter or an actual company? Like just
They didn't specify that. Let's see if they'll anybody who's hiring.
so one, that's where it kind of goes back to the very beginning of making sure it's kind of foolproof for if they use an ATS. Not everybody does, but most will. So you want it to be able to be searchable in there. You want your name, your proficiencies, everything to kind of pop up. We use Greenhouse, and I would recommend, it's probably worth your time to spend an hour looking at like the top 3 or 4, ATS platforms that are out there. So then you can kind of see what a recruiter or somebody on the other side will be seeing, right? I mean, if you really want to know kind of what we're looking at, dive into that. And that should help you out in terms of, okay, this may be why I'm not being seen. Because I had somebody ask, their biggest problem is just getting an interview or being seen. And that's where it goes back to, it's probably the resume then. That's what's getting you knocked out, is the resumes just not resonate. It's not resonating. It's not being seen or being kind of buzzed for a recruiter or hiring manager to look at. So that's what's probably disqualifying you more so than it just not being seen by a company. Because you could go on LinkedIn or anywhere else and see it. I'm actually, let me pull this up. This was one of my things that I think would really help in terms of being creative in your job search. Don't rely just on LinkedIn and, Indeed, things like that. Be creative and go and find the people like Twitter. We recruit off Twitter, GitHub. A lot of people recruit on GitHub, Slack, different Slack channels. And then Hacker News. Hacker News post every day, and it just gets buried in there when we post something. And you can put your profile out there too, like, hey, I'm this developer, this is my experience, and that way people are reaching out to you. Because when you're put in those communities, right, if you get on a Postgres Slack channel, right, that's where most of us recruiters are going and finding people. A JavaScript Slack channel, I'm going on there to pull people because I know those people are actually submerged in the software development community, right? They're leaning on others for questions and things like that. So I know that person's likely going to be self-sufficient on getting the answers that they need, not burdensome to a higher level developer. So when we're looking at, especially like when we're looking for somebody who just has like 2 to 3 years experience, like that can go 50-50 in terms of they could be really good or they're just still stuck in that they don't know how to ask questions and or find answers for themselves. So they're a huge tax on your mid and senior developers versus somebody who, like I said, on those channels, I like recruiting off there for those people because I know they know how to interact with the community and get the answers that they want. And a lot of other recruiters that are in my network, and when we go, to meetups and things like that, that's where they're typically pulling people from first before they go into, hey, yeah, I got 100 people on LinkedIn. I just browse it really quick and no, versus you're actually getting a lot more eyes on in those communities. So yeah, I'd say like Slack, Hacker News, GitHub, being creative in all those other areas. That's not Indeed and LinkedIn where they're getting 1,000 applicants, right? You can be in a much smaller group getting eyes on your resume in those smaller communities. So that's where, I mean, if you're kind of going back to the other one of maybe Tuesday, Thursday for a couple hours doing the blitz, Monday, Wednesday, Friday, hey, here's 2 hours that I'm really diving into these communities. Well, actually, let me show you my Slack, and I'll show you exactly what I'm talking about. I'll share my screen here. I am sharing my screen. Back. Window. Slack. Share. All right. So like Austin Code Mentorship, right? So I have a lot more, but I keep them closed throughout the day. That way it doesn't blow up my whole feed on here. But job boards, right? So throwing it up on there and then people replying back in. Same thing, PrestoDB, there's jobs posted in here. Postgres jobs posted in here. Let me go share another screen with you really quick. Stop. All right. So, who wants to be hired? This is for January 2022. We'll go on here. This is Hacker News, and I can go through and see, who wants to be hired, a lot of their credentials. Hey, I'm here. I only want to work remote. These are technologies I used. Here's my resume. Here's my email. And they introduce themselves. So, I know my team and a lot of other people, we like to go in there because if someone's on Hacker News, then I know that they're involved in the community. They're doing research. They're kind of staying at the top of their game. And then same thing. There's jobs that are posted on here, like who's hiring for January, who's hiring for February. And there were so many jobs that were posted just in here. It ended up, I couldn't post anything the last week and a half of January because there was too many jobs posted. Like it just filled everything. So those are jobs that they'll post in here though, but they won't post it on Indeed or anywhere else because they want to get somebody who's involved in the community. And I think this is where being creative in your search will make it much easier for you to stand out, because then you're competing with 5 other people who responded to it rather than 500 people who responded to it. So there's a lot of those communities and channels out there. Just being creative in your search for that.
All right, great. There are a few other questions. Not sure if you wanted to share anything else, Tyler, on the visual side.
Yeah, we can just go for questions right now, I think.
Awesome. All right, so I graduated from coding bootcamp and have had a hard time getting my foot in the door. As soon as I mentioned my only experience as a 1-month junior software engineering contract, so first job, bad experience, and some of my projects were done during bootcamp. I never hear back. I'm getting frustrated, and at this point, because I feel technically capable to do something, but I'm not getting any opportunities, even though I've expressed my willingness to work hard and catch up to speed. Are there apprenticeships, paid internships I can take on? I have no luck in finding those.
Yeah, there's quite a bit, actually, in terms of internships, apprenticeships, and residencies that will pay. They're going to be competitive. And if I could ask, and this is kind of like the retrospect thing, right? So whoever asked the question, because I don't have the questions up, how long have they been searching? Has it been more than like 6 months? You can say yes or no if it's more than 6 months.
There we go. If you want to, 1 month for now.
Okay. And this may be where my perspective of time is easier from the outside looking in. I don't feel like 1 month is really that long. I feel like it probably usually takes somebody 3 to 4 months to find the right fit. I know that can be kind of discouraging to hear, like, man, 90 days of searching and everything else. But it's a process. It is. And this is the part where don't get lost in the despair of rejection that it's not helping out. I just saw one pop up. It's been 6 months. My question would be, what is your current job that you're doing for the last 6 months? If you were in IT support or technical support role for like the last 6 months, do you think your resume would look different by now and easier to get a job than just focusing in on, hey, you know what, I'm making decent money as a barista or whatever else they're doing? Because I have people who are just, they get caught up in, I'm making, I'm just kind of plateaued at 50,000 or 55,000, and I don't want to go do IT support for 45. And again, my perspective is on that. You shouldn't be at that position for a full year. You may be looking at that for 3 to 4 months, but that helps you get your foot in the door in the technology field, kind of going back to what we talked about earlier. And then, yeah, if you're going in that, keeping the perspective of it's, if I put like a 90-day window of a solid job search in there, approaching every job interview like this is mine, right? And then when you get the rejection or anything else, don't let it deter you to keep that optimism and that next one, and just keep going, because it's going to happen, right? Like you're here, there's enough of a demand, it's going to happen. I can guarantee you the only thing that'll keep you from getting into the software development field in the next 12 months will be giving up. That I could hang my hat on that. If you have the skills that you have, if you went to the boot camp you went to, and then you got any foot in the door that you can with IT, like I said, whether it's technical support, call center analyst, whatever you can do to get your foot in that door, within 12 months you should have something. I can't imagine anything other than showing up drunk to interviews being the one thing that would hold you back, because there is such a demand that proving yourself during that time will get you there. So, and that's the part, right? Like you didn't get in this to retire in 18 months, right? You didn't get this to retire in 24 months. So this is your career. You know, people will spend 4 years going to college and then take an internship and then getting the same struggle that somebody who didn't do that gets into. And I'm like, man, speaking to people who did that, I'm like, great, you have tens of thousands of dollars in debt or $100,000 in debt, and it took you 4 years and you're still in the same spot that most people who did a good boot camp are in. So, you know, you took a wiser path, in my opinion, for what you're wanting to do, because that's the future. Right? The companies I work with now, it used to be you have to have a bachelor's degree. Over half of the companies I work with now, they don't care. You know, you just show them that you can work, and it's probably way less than half actually this year compared to where was that before, and next year it's going to be the same thing, dropping even more. So the landscape is changing, companies are changing, so you know, keep going with it.
Awesome. Paul has a question. Can we load our resumes into the ATS site to check it prior to sending it out?
I don't know if there's one that's out there. Like people who message me, I'll throw it in really quick, because then I can take a screenshot and send it back to them. Be like, hey, this is what popped up, just so you know, your name doesn't show up, or when I go in and I'm looking at something, I can see I have like an experience tab where it'll show me a different window. I can see the resume, and I have another one. What pulls up? It'll say like summary, like the person's summary, work history, title unknown. Like what their work. I'm looking at my screen actually while I'm saying this. Where it kind of goes through education, like, so it just kind of pulls things, and depending on the ATS system will depend on what it kicks back, but most of them are kind of built on the same thing. So like on the right hand side of mine, because we have both Breezy and Greenhouse, I can see under details for a candidate, always pop in, generate their name, their title, the position they're applying for. They'll probably do the same thing. I don't know anybody who's like, no, I'm not going to do that for you. It may take them 24 hours to get back to you, but I look at it as building relationships. I may not have a position for somebody now, and like Zach Ayers could be a great developer. I may not have a position for him now, but if I can get him working today, then that makes him valuable to me when I do have a spot. I don't want him to wait a month or 2 months or 6 months to get into the tech field, because then that's somebody in my network who I can't use for another 6 months or 12 months, things like that. So that's where I keep my perspective, because with my company, I'm planning to be here for the long haul. I want to retire with OpenTeams. I love where we're going, everything we have planned for this next year, going global, and being brought on. That's why I came onto the team. And a lot of the relationships I fostered, like people that I had talked to who went to a boot camp 3 years ago, are people now that I'm actually enrolling into some of our having contracts signed for summer projects where they can bill, $250 an hour. Like that's awesome to me, that, and it kind of gave me the perspective of the relationships I'm building right now are ones that should last my career. So that's why,
But we got a bunch of questions. I know we're almost kind of running out of time. I will definitely include Tyler's LinkedIn in the chat if you guys want to reach to him. But some more other questions that we have. So let's see, Matthew, any tips for an accountant with 4 years of experience? Are there skill sets that are transferable into IT?
Yes. You're okay. And I say this because we have a couple partners we're working with who want financial experience, and I can tell you right now, our budget for that is around $550,000 for the salary. If you can keep your experience and build it out in fintech, fintech is huge. that's really where a lot of growth and market demand is going to be. And I think if you continue down that path, you'll be very happy. Now, again, not saying money is everything. It's a different, you kind of have to have a different personality. Kind of look at like a CPA, but on the tech side, right? You have that, and that's where you're going to be rolling some money there, highly sought after, and they know it. When I interview somebody, first question is, what's the stock? Like, they know their worth in the tech field. So yeah, fintech, if you can kind of parallel those two, you're golden.
Awesome. All right, so next question. I've worked on some projects that weren't run as a professional project, but instead as an open contribution repository that anyone could add on to. Because of that, I ended up being very casual because of the contributors and random people outside of the repository members. It has impressive work with React and Rust and a lot of other nice things, but should I worry about the casualness of it all? Should only private contributors, curated projects be added to my resume?
No, because I say that from my perspective. I work with OpenTeams. We are all about the open source community, how to fund that, how to fund projects, getting companies that use open source and funding those projects to have them get what they want. So I'm speaking from my lens because that's where I would pull people from. Like, that's what we look at. That's what Facebook is looking at. That's what most, Google's looking at. It's all built on the back of open source software. So you don't want to hide that. And again, that's my perspective from the companies that I work with. So that's why I'm putting that lens on there.
Awesome. And then next question, Alan, do you have a sense of the job market for now for junior developers or fresh off bootcamp grads that can pull a mid-level position as compared to 2020 and 2019? Is it a better market or worse?
I think it's a better market. There's a lot more people in it, but I think it's a better market for the prepared junior developer, right? If you're going to only rely on okay, I did my boot camp and now I'm just going to put my projects on there, my skills on there, and not really kind of test it, weed it through, get some different perspectives, and then you're only going to go on LinkedIn and Indeed to apply for jobs, it's going to be harder. But it's being creative and doing the other things that are going to make it easier for you. Like I said, the sooner you get into the game, the quicker you're moving up, because it's not slowing down. There's not fewer people going into boot camps and fewer people graduating from college and all the other things. The talent pool is getting bigger, but so is the market and so is the demand. So, I think they're keeping pace. So being creative about how you do it is going to be much more beneficial. And I can say, if anybody has questions too, I'm not tied on time. So if there's anybody who wants to stay after a different thing, I can happy to help out. That way it's kind of quicker if it's a bulk question rather than 100 of the same on LinkedIn.
Yeah. All right, Michael's question. I ran a small business where I have a bit of flexibility in how I approach the job, thinking that the business won't be viable in the long run. I want to break into SE or data science. Are there specific things you would look for from a business owner that you would recommend I do in the meantime?
I can't think of anything that I would want to see different than, somebody who went to a boot camp, if that makes sense. Like, I don't see anything that I would want the resume to look differently. I think the only thing that would be beneficial is if you're looking at a startup who may look at your ability to own your own business in a better light, right? Like, they're just going to have probably more impressive view of you if it's a smaller startup and they have a smaller team. So that may be where, you kind of have that buddy handshake, right? When you first talk and, they're talking about the struggle of a startup and you can relate, right? That's probably one of the few things you can do. But it just depends on what jobs you're applying for. That's what I think. I mean, because when we send somebody over, I remember we sent over, 5 people for really senior position, all fit the skill set, but everything we got back was culture fit, no culture fit. Because it's, I mean, you're working, if you're in a startup, be prepared for well over 40 hours a week. They want to mesh well with those people. So, you know, that's where the personality was important. And again, these are kind of higher level positions too. So it's not just a, you know, junior developer role. You'll still get the not a good culture fit at a director level role. So that's maybe where owning your own business coming in may be a bit more relatable with a startup.
Great. Next question. Do you know of any partners who want healthcare experience speaking as a registered nurse of 7 years? Is that something you've ever seen?
I mean, there's people in health. I'm trying to think of kind of in my network where that would be applicable. I mean, I know that there is, but I couldn't see a good relatable one to where, you know, unless the company is specifically marketing a, hey, this is our POS system that we use for in the healthcare that nurses are using, something like that. I mean, that may be companies that you want to research into, because then you're also like, you have experience as the end user. Because actually, and it's funny because you said that, because I had somebody who they worked at Ford for a long time, and then they ended up getting a job at Tesla, and they were a good fit just because of their background in the automotive industry. They liked them in that skill set. I mean, they pretty much matched up with everything else. They had the skill set. It wasn't just that alone, but once they were in the final round compared to everybody else, it was they had experience in the automotive industry. Let's bring them in because of that background perspective that they bring. So, I mean, was it the thing that got them started in the interview process from them staying out? No, but was it the thing differentiating factor in the end? Yes. I think you probably do that for most positions if you want to go that route. Target's a perfect example. If you want to be a software developer at Target, but you had other experience at Target, you're on a short list for that.
All right. So I'm looking into QA work. Any advice?
I don't have good advice for that. Sorry. Any different than what I've given so far. I don't know. We can with something else. So.
Yeah. Okay. I have 2 years of education experience. I taught music. Are there any skills in that field that I can transfer to the tech field?
I would think it's probably gonna be more on like the visualization side, roles like that, where I see that being more the creative type. And I think that's where some of it would be that culture fit, right? Because there's definitely plenty of those, and there's plenty of startups, different companies where they would take you on. That's why I'm thinking of something like that, right? Because when like Bose, some of those where it was good kind of seeing people that had industry experience or other experience there when bringing them over, because then they also had a passion for it. And if you have a passion for it in the market of the great resignation, you're more likely to stick to it if you're excited about it, right? Just like kind of going back to the Purina puppy chow. If you have a desire for music and everything else, it may not be as good. But if you have experience where you fostered dogs and, you know, did all this other stuff and you're applying for that company, they're probably looking at you like, oh, they're probably going to stay here a little bit longer. They've shown that they enjoy that sector. That would be my perspective, just on trying to put in a candidate that I think will stick a little more glue to them.
Great. Are there any tips that are more directed towards cybersecurity that you can share?
That's going to be one of my weakest points, I will say, in terms of recruiting, kind of placements there. Man, I can't think of much, because I even had people, like, even when on my other job, when apprenticeships and everything else, really tough to come into. Most of it though came down to the certifications that you had. Like I know that, at least with some of my friends, if you didn't have the, you know, all your CompTIA certifications and you weren't checking that box, it didn't matter how good you were at it. Like, you needed that CompTIA cert, and that's really the way to advance that career. that's all I have on that one. I couldn't really answer much more outside of just get your CompTIA certifications.
Awesome. And then can you give an example of something you saw on a resume from someone fresh out of the boot camp with no tech work experience that made them stand out in a positive way?
To me, let me go back to sharing this one because this is how I would want to see it. Window. This. Because to me, this is much more like experience than reading just what a project is, right? Because they're telling exactly what they did on that project. They're breaking it down just like they would work history, because this is work history. I mean, your project, you could put it under experience if you wanted to, but especially if you've done some pretty extensive projects, if you spent 6 months working on something, that's experience. That's not just a product or a project, right? Like if you're continuing to work on after your boot camp and everything else, that's experience. And you could literally put a timeline attached to that, started in October 2021 to current, still working on that. Because and that would be my question, is how is that any different than getting a contract or a consulting job where you're working on just one thing for somebody, right? Like you're just not getting paid for it. That's the biggest difference. So if you're setting it up and you may not have experience, you just have your projects read out exactly like the experience would. Because look at how this experience, web developer, 2 lines, software engineer, 2 lines. But then you look at the projects, his projects speak more to his experience than his actual job experience does. So that's where, to me, it makes a difference in what stands out. Where I look at it, I'm like, okay, this person knows what they're talking about and they can present something well.
Great. All right. It looks like it's our last question. How do I use being from an underrepresented minority in tech?
Got to say it's the most HR compliant way. You're at a really good spot. Yeah, I look at that from if following groups that have like diversity, and this is where, okay, networking. I think of a guy in my network, his name's Michael Kelly. He's the diversity and inclusion director for Target. Went to high school with him and everything. I was kind of following him in his career, and that's his whole job, right? Bring in talent from underrepresented groups. And then a lot of the stuff that he comments on or posts on are now people that are also in that network. And if that's the advantage you want to take in getting in with a company, you want to connect with those people on LinkedIn. Now, for like Michael Joff, that may not work as well for him to reach out and connect with the diversity and inclusion people, because you're a white male. That probably won't be as beneficial of a connection for you. But for anybody who's not a white male, that's a much better way to connect than probably just a bunch of recruiters. Will be those individuals who can really help leverage that for you, who want to foster and bring you in. So, because if you get that diversity and inclusion person from said company that you want to work for, that's where to reach out. And don't do it with just the FANG. Like I said, look at Target, look at Walmart, the companies that you're familiar with that have tens of thousands of employees, but aren't necessarily on the top of the board, right? They're probably doing a lot of college recruiting, and that's where they get pigeonholed with not getting the diverse talent that they need. Because they're just going to those college places, not boot camps, because they really can't ground and pound on boot camps. So.
All right, great. Thank you. So those are all the questions. Everyone's thanking you in the chat for answering all their questions. Thank you so much for being here. Also, if you want to watch this back, we are recording this session and we will be posting it on our YouTube channel. Let me get you guys that link really quick. And you can view all of our previous Tech Talks on there as well. Here it is. We will post it either by the end of today or this weekend. Also, if you do have like any questions for Tyler or just want to connect with him on LinkedIn, you know, networking, we've talked about that a lot today. Here's Tyler's LinkedIn. I'll put that in the chat box as well. Also, next week we have another Tech Talk. We have one of our graduates, David Meyer, coming in, doing a talk about basically the importance of ongoing education as a developer. He just graduated a few months ago and is already working within the field. And if you want to RSVP for that talk, here it is. Let me just quickly paste that in there for you guys. But other than that, thank you so much, Tyler, for being here. Thank you, everyone, for joining. I hope everyone enjoyed today's session and hope everyone has a great weekend.
I was going to say, if you didn't notice, you can change your LinkedIn. So after your name, rather than a bunch of numbers, put in something in software development so you stand out, because that's going to be on your resume too. So.
Yep. Awesome.
Sorry.
Yeah. No. All good. We want to make sure everyone has all their tips. Yeah. Awesome. We love it. But
good stuff, Tyler. Great presentation. We appreciate it, and apologize for the interruptions. We'll get that worked out.
No worries. All right. Y'all have a good one.
You as well. Thank you guys for joining. Bye.
Bye.
Thanks all.